education. It was not a law. It was not a law. And if you see the date 1833, it happened in 1833. And while you are sitting in Bhagalpur, Macaulay's minutes pinching you every minute, isn't it? You are dealing with the students coming from vernacular languages, and where Macaulay had said in 1833 that English would be a torch bearer. English would be the language of higher education, or English would be the language of India's education. And it's pinching it. So that's what I'm emphasizing two things. One is understanding about online education, and another thing is understanding the education policy. Policy is means I need not to repeat it again and again. It's not a law. It's not even binding. It's not even guidelines for the most of the states. Like when we come to the discussion board, you would know that most of the states in India, they don't have any education policy at all. Okay, we will come to that. But right now, understanding the policy, it gives you a framework, and that framework is overarching. Something happened in 1833, which is impacting our education right now. And the thing which happened in new education policy in 2017 is impacting us today. And it will impact India's future of education, not just during the COVID, even 100 years after the COVID. So what framework government is having. And the third thing which we are taking is the digital divide. Third thing which we are taking is the digital divide, the layers of education. Here I'm using online education, but please read it layers of education. In your classroom, first bench to the sixth bench, there are layers. Caste group, there are learners group, there are learners levels. So there is already a divide. When I proposed in this topic, the digital divide, I was not meaning a poor and rich. I was not meaning rural and urban. I was meaning the divide which is already there. Divide which is already there in the education, divide which we are dealing day in, day out in our classrooms. So at the outset of the lecture, I wanted to clarify these three things. First thing is online education, referring to the entire education technology. Second thing which is education policy, which is a broader framework which gives us idea how to behave, how to approach. Okay, and third thing is the digital divide, or the divide which is already there in our classrooms. Okay, now I would like to take it from the purpose of education. Another trivial things, but one of the icebreakers. The purpose of education, everything gets decided. Being a teacher myself, I often take time and ask my students that why are you studying? Why are you coming to the classes? What is your purpose for education? What is your purpose for taking admission to a particular university or not taking? And I'm not keeping it, I'm just using it to connect with all the faculty members or the research scholars who have joined this meeting. So purpose of education, invariably students are saying, if they are very shy, they will say some other things. But by and large, purpose of education is nothing but to find a job, isn't it? And this is very evident when you are in state universities. The students coming there, they just need a graduation degree, they just need a post-graduation degree, and purpose of education is very clear. And there is no harm in it. There is no harm in it knowing the purpose of education. Why I am using the purpose of education here? Because purpose of education will determine what would be the setup of online classes. If the purpose of education is to get jobs, or if a purpose of education is to get certain degrees, how deep and how insightful and how valuable you can make your online classes depends on what is the purpose of education. If the purpose of education varies, like purpose of education in classrooms of JU, classrooms of DU, classrooms of BHUs are different. The purpose of education in uh, vernacular languages, or those who are studying political science or economics in Hindi or in Bengali, their purpose of education would be different. So for setting education technology, it has to be different. You see a lot of advertisements for the Byju's and other classes, other online platforms. So the purpose of education is to get the GREs, to get the SAT scores, to get admission into American or European universities. So their purpose of education is different. And if the same Byju's classes are being joined by our students in Delhi, in Patna, in Bhagalpur, in Buxar, so that would be different. So online classes which are being sold, which are being marketed right now, so their purpose of education is different, and the purpose of education of our kids are different, which the market gives us right now in the format of Cortana smart classes or any other smart classes. So their purpose of education is to get enrolled somewhere else, or even the Unacademy's classes for IS preparation. So the purpose of education is different. So here we have to understand the purpose of education. Now, I also had chance to ask my students, do you feel privileged while sitting in the class? Because in our universities, our teachers told us that education is a privilege. Education is not a right, like it's written in our driving license. Driving is a privilege. Driving is not your right. Higher education particularly is a privilege. But do our students in ordinary classrooms, do they believe or do they really feel or experience this privilege? If they are feeling this privilege in ordinary classrooms, then it is expected that they would feel the privilege in the online classrooms also. So, or the purpose of education is well-being. Again, when the online classes will be rolled out, there would be criticism, there would be disadvantages, and this kind of education is eroding the normal teaching learning methods. This is not there. This is not the part of ordinary classroom, so don't expect online classroom to create well-being, to create good human being, if it is not the part of. Okay, one dimension of purpose of education is meant to create something, or education is just to support the industry. Here in the neoliberal phase, I just wanted to clear that being a student of economics, I'm not critiques of neoliberal regime, but since I have been dealing, one of the paper which I'm teaching in MBA is industrial sales maximization. Why I'm putting it here, the industrial sales maximization is because when I'm teaching my students industrial sales maximization, I need to make my students, MBA students particularly, to believe that these MBA students are going to tell the consumers that iPhone 6 was not the best invention, but iPhone 7 is the best one. Okay, so what industrial sales maximization, in very brief, I'm emphasizing here, is it's delegitimizing the same thing which it emphasized in the previous year. When iPhone 6 was released, so all the marketers were having the job to emphasize that iPhone 6 is the invention of the century. iPhone 5 was thing of the past. And when iPhone 7 was released, the same marketers were teaching. Marketing is a teaching. Same marketers were going to the market and teaching the consumers, oh, iPhone 6 is waste. What is there in iPhone 7. Okay, so current education system is protease of neoliberal regime. So believe it or not, it's there. And we are meant to serve this purpose. So while criticizing or emphasizing or discussing the education policy or the online classes, we need to put those limitations aside. It is there. So those limitations are with the ordinary classrooms, are going to be and rest with the online classes also. Now I'm coming to the education policy and politics of education a little bit. I will take 5 minutes time for this. If you want, if anybody wants to interject or discuss something, you can do, or otherwise we will do in the question hour. See, as you were looking for the Macaulay's minute or neoliberal intervention in the education setup, education is a highly politicized subject. All the political science professors, I would request you to recall the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution. Education was a state subject. It was brought to the concurrent list in 42nd Amendment. Okay. And when did 42nd Amendment of the Constitution happen? 42nd Amendment of the Constitution happened in 1976. During the time of emergency. During the time of emergency, this amendment happened and education was taken from a state and brought to the centers. What is the politics behind this? All those people for the PSC, they know that Amendment 42nd is a mini constitution. Yeah. And Amendment 44th, when the Janata government came, Janata government repealed all other clauses except some, and education being one of them, and education remain in the concurrent list. Why this is politics? This is politics because education was made part of this politics, and education was snatched from the state and brought to the concurrent list. And now most of the educational intervention which you and me and all of us are part of are very much guided by the central rule. Again, what is the problem with the central rule? What is the problem with the central intervention? When the center is intervening, the nature of education has changed. So now it's from the bottom, it's not the bottom up, but it's a filtration approach. Whatever the diktat coming from the center, it's being implemented. Problem is now the states have, all these state universities have lost their legitimacy. From this angle, you will understand the politics. Be it Patna University, be it Bhagalpur University, be it Allahabad University. Now, all the universities are now running to become a central university. The nature of the educational sphere had changed. And now it's becoming more and more centralized. And now the interest of the locals, which Modi ji has emphasized, that the interest of local has been ignored in our researches, in our laboratories, in our agriculture studies, everywhere it's been sidelined. And now it's a central focus is whatever the central university does, other universities will have to follow. Okay, now how this is impacting the education policy or education sphere as such. Education policy, now I would like you to see I would like you to see the team, National Policy on Education. See the members. I hope since the topic has been floated and you all have gone through. So Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan, Vasudha Kamat, Manjul Bhargav, K.J. Alphonse, and others, like 9-member committee were there. None of the committee members were representing any state. None of the committee members were not even representing any zone, India zone, north, east, south. It's nothing. It's not there. What they were, I hope you are, K. Kasturi Rangan was former chairman of ISRO. I hope everybody is familiar with this. And he himself is a part and product of state education institutions. He is a product of not a central government institutions. He is a product of state government institutions. Vasudha Kamath is very much from NCERT, and she is education technology expert. And again, she was vice chancellor of SNDT University, of course, belonging to the state of Maharashtra, and her contribution is there. Manjul Bhargava, being the Canadian American mathematics professor. KJ Alphonse KJ Alphonse was a controversial BJP member. Later on, he resigned from the committee. But and other members I have not mentioned because we don't want to spend much of the time. But this education policy committee, I am not going to criticize here. I'm just presenting the fact here. Largely, the members were non-social science background. Largely, you can go and do the background checking. Okay, I'm not supposed to do this thing here. But largely, they were not from the social science background, and mostly they were from the technology background, like one being the scientist, another education technology expert, another one is mathematician and politician, and others were the agriculture science expert, like this. Particularly social science experts were not there, and government did not bother to. I'm not criticizing the government. If I was in the government or you were in the government, you were having similar problems getting the people on board. I'm not criticizing. I'm just putting the facts. It's there. It's a limitation of the policy itself. When states were not represented, when zones were not represented, subjects were not represented, what is expected there? So again, my point of view here is the education policy, which is there to stay, not just for 1 year or 5 years, as I said in Macaulay's minutes or Hunter Commission's report, or even the Sarkaria Commission, Secondary Education Commission. This remained in, this has overarching impact on overall policy. But what is the catch here? Catch here is our education policy, however, this recent education policy, however, not able to deliver on most of the aspects, but is very much up to date in the case of online education. I really appreciate the work done by Vasudha Kamath ji, and it's a very far-reaching. Like, if this policy was prepared in 2017 and it talks about cloud computing, it talks about whole lot of issues. It means fortunately or unfortunately, we had one member in the committee who represented education technology, and on the issue of education technology, I can vouch the new education policy is as good as it can. I really appreciate it, and I mean it. While putting the other limitations aside, on the issue of education technology, it really deals and it really talks very well. Now, coming to the what the policy says. The policy is very deliberate, and policy has dedicated one full chapter on education technology, that is chapter number 19. Okay, this policy talks about National Education Repository of Data. It's a very commendable job, National Educational Repository of Data. It's a in part 6 of chapter 19. It says that India has a huge. India's higher education is second largest in the world, right after China, and we are creating a lot of contents, and those contents has to be preserved. And first time it talks about the National Education Repository. It also talks about the access to technology. Access to technology even in the schools. In our education policy, they have vividly, emphatically, reasonably, and logically emphasized for IT ambassadors. IT ambassadors in village yeah, it talks about IT ambassadors in village schools, and it says that all those technology guys which are coming out of schools, coming out of engineering schools, they should serve like a doctor in the village schools, like IT ambassador for a year. This education policy takes cognizance of software and hardware issues recurring in the universities and colleges. So this education policy has mandated about there should have been IT ambassador in the schools. Policy also talks about necessary intervention and promising intervention. So necessary intervention is that there, which means that in the policy it has to be that national level framework where
Aditya sir, there seems to be a bit
yeah.
problem with the sound. So if you restrict your movement so that you remain close to the mic, so I think that is the something which is bringing the trouble. Sir, if you can please.
Sorry, it's about voice or
Now it's clear, I think. So please continue,
now
sir.
it's clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's clear now.
Yeah, it's very clear now.
Yeah. So here I'm showing that National Repository of Educational Data will maintain all records related to institutions, teachers, digital form. Backward. So streamlining planning and so in entire education policy document, first time is being maintaining the content means all sort of things which you can I'll take one by one.
Sorry to interrupt, विवेक जी आप सही आवाज सुन
Here I was talking, I'm doing
आदित्य सर थोड़े से ना we are like finding glitches in the sound.
okay.
So
It's a technology also. So even this education policy talks about expansion of educators are still a challenge, and they are talking for the SN and other which I'll by one. So India is one of the very few countries where we have a clear-cut guidelines creating even Swayam platform is there and it's really working very well. Before Swayam, there were NPTEL and other attempts were made. Attempts were definitely made, and India is leading a country in the case of education technology. Uh, we are also we are one of the few countries where emphasis is being made, at least in all the central universities, having their own publication houses. India is also one of the leading countries where online assessment came way before the online education. So, uh, and this has been discussed in the policy document also. What is problematic here, and where policy is kind of silent while providing the benchmarking of online content. I also had privilege to participate in one of the programs in IIM Kolkata, where there was discussion on very small NGO based online content creation, like uh, be it Pratham or be it Eklavya or be it a huge number of NGOs. They are also creating. If you go to the south, in south there are small NGOs. They are creating a whole lot of educational contents in the form of videos, in the form of specialized lectures, and they are disseminating it. So first time in this education policy, uh, government or the committee assigned by government has addressed those issues, but they failed to discuss the quality issue. They failed to discuss the issue of benchmarking. Uh, I don't have any hesitation in sharing that in I am Kolkata, I asked this question that I am from NUPA, I am from NCRT. When there is a kind of mela of online education, mela of intervention of technology in education, is there any guidelines for benchmarking or standardization? What is the standard operating or standard document for class 5 or class 10, or if there is like on the normal education system you have NCRT and others. So the response of not the panel members, the response of the group as a whole was like, you are the only person from NCRT, you are talking like this, you're always talking in the administrative terms. Who gives you the right to talk about this? Here it is not the case of being like that. Here is the benchmark, looking for ideals. It's not creating a perfect curriculum. It's not creating a perfect class, perfect content. But where is the benchmark? From where we can, like, 0 mile. 0 mile is the one where the NH begins. National highway begins from zero. If you don't have zero, how can you calculate the kilometers? So, and again, the problem with the new education policy here is with the benchmarking. And again, I'm saying, though in the committee, there were members from education technology expert, there were members from space science expert, but not from the ordinary teaching learning community, especially social sciences, where we know the problem of delivering wrong content. We know the problem of delivering not just content, the same thing, the same history, the same culture, the same language, the Indian constitution, the way it is being functioning. But if you are being taught by the Indian scholars, so their view would be different. Same the caste system and other things, like somebody is dealing with. So there is a huge issue with this, the benchmarking, the quality assurance. Though this education policy has really talked in depth about the access to education. On paper, we have a digital India. On paper, we have internet facilities in villages. But I myself have visited so many schools in Odisha. I myself have visited so many schools, and you are visiting schools. Even if the computer is available in the schools, it is being covered by bedsheet. It's covered by bedsheet, and it's being used only for the showcase purpose. It's not just in the private, not just in the government school, it's in the private school too. Private schools, class 1 to 5 is only showcase. MS Print, you go and do the MS Print, and that's there. And pay every month 700 rupees per computer. So it's like this. Standardization of the curriculum or the content which is missing. Now I am coming, I'm completely adhering to your time limit. Now I am coming to the aspects of online education. Online education, the aspects of online education which I wanted to emphasize here, the layers of online education. Because here, there are layers which I have already said. What teacher all have experienced. There are basically three types of learners: learning through images, learning through pictures. Yeah, there are learners, there are learners like we call them visual learners, auditory learners,
Sir,
and
I'm interrupting. Aditya sir, I am interrupting. With the movements, like the movements that you are making, your voice getting disconnected in between. So we are finding it difficult, like it's coming in broken form. So if you can be a bit still, then I think then sound is more clear. So I request you to kind of restrict your movements. That is something
movement.
creating.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No. It's fine. It's completely fine.
Okay.
If voice is broken
Yeah.
and there is no point. Okay.
Sir, please
So
continue.
we are classifying them in three basic types. Three types is like one is the visual learners, another is auditory learners, and third is, since I am part of this education institution, so I cannot leave this aside. So what is happening in the classroom? In the classroom setup, we are able to deal with these three kinds of learners. Though very successful, very animated, very live online setups fail to capture the categories of learners. Besides being rich and poor and front bench and last bench, these are there. These are there. We are not going to discuss much into this. Learning technology point of view, the online classes are very much in favor of visual learners, and it is very much soothing. And researchers have shown that in any classroom there are 65%, 65 to 70% learners are visual learners. If you draw on the board, they would feel good. If you show them some picture, they would feel good. But there are 30% learners, they are auditory learners. They learn from your words. They learn from the words. And what is dichotomous here is when pictures, images, videos, live demonstrations, these take the space of sound or audition, then those learners also get affected. Now the third Third category is kinesynthesis learners, like those learners who are learning from the movements, from the activities. Even internet gives us some scope for doing activities online, like answering. You can, in the Zoom call, there could be whiteboard where you can write something, everybody can scribble something, but still there is a limitation for the kinetic activities. So one major limitation with the online classes, so wherever this online classes like Harvard and most of the prestigious universities, they are offering MBA degrees and other certification. They also require the people to come physically even for a month. I hope everybody is getting my point, which I am trying to emphasize with the category of learners. Even if there is a category of learners and there is a even uneven distribution of learning, there in best of the schools, they call people at least for a month to come and complete the remaining part of the learning, which is not available in online education format which we are using. And education policy itself is completely silent on this case. They do mention the blended learning, they do mention the hybrid learning, but none of the MOOC programs or none of the Swayam programs, they say that, okay, there could be one of the bridges for the remaining part, or bridges for the deficit of learning which is created by online learning. I hope I'm making this point clear. Okay. So this limitation remains with the online classes, and this limitation is not yet been addressed by our current education policy, the draft of education policy, which is there. Now I'm coming to the steps through which we are approaching to implement the education policy and to assimilate the online education. We have a repository of data, we have infrastructure. Supposedly necessary and promising interventions which is already been made. Are we ready to embrace this thing? That's what I say. It's a politics is a kind of, when political science is a science of love. Are there demand for online education from the politics point of view or policy point of view? Is there a demand for online education besides COVID? There was, in political sense, there was none. Has anybody raised the concern for online education? No. Again, I'm saying, as it happened, education policy 1, education policy 1968, education policy 1986, 1992, and now 2019. Online education is being imposed. Again, do the students of Bhagalpur University or Patna University ready to embrace online education? Are they demanding it? In the political stakeholders perspective, political bargaining sense, it is not there. Are teachers demanding this? No. Parents demanding this? No. Who is demanding online education? Whose concern is this? Whose benefit, whose interest is this? It's market interest. It's market interest. You can contradict me, you can ask questions around this, but the first step of policy success is all the stakeholders of online education are not on board. Students are not on board, parents are not on board, teachers are not on board, even government is not on board. Whose interest we are serving? We are serving market's interest. Okay, fine. Market is driving us. We are serving market's interest. Market's interest on whose terms? Market's interest again in market's terms. Market also serves interest, but market serves interest in most of the cases on consumer benefit, on consumer convenience. What kind of convenience we are getting here? What kind of purpose getting served here? Are we not able to fetch more?
Sorry to interrupt.
Making the system more improved, there are practical issues. We have in our group senior faculty members. How difficult it is for them to adapt to these things. I'm not averse to this. Time will come, online education is a reality, nobody can deny this. But
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, please.
Aditi sir, could you please conclude now? It's already 12. It's more than 12. It's
I'm about to conclude. Yeah, okay. I'm about to conclude. Do we have a plan for making our senior professors adapting to the online system? I have not gone through any of the documents knowing this. Do the technology or the market helping them to adapt those things? No, they are being succumbed to, they are being forced to, they don't have any other option but to do this. My only perception from the political science point of view is any stakeholder to whom you are forcing that, okay, you have to adopt this, it's not going to helpful. But it is going to helpful when we tell, sir, your knowledge is very valuable. The thing which you are delivering in the classes is very important, is having a lot of value. Why not we record this? So in a phased manner, we can take our senior professors or scholars to the online classes. Not just imposing them process and then accessible. There are universities where the appointments has not been done. It's been run by only senior professors. So the divide is getting more and more broader, rather getting closer, rather getting narrower. With this, I close my statement. Okay. Yeah, Vivek ji, it's over to you.
Really, it's a very wonderful and well-researched lecture on this topic, and you have covered almost the historical, political, and economic aspect of the education. So, without taking much time, now the floor is open for the participants. Anybody who have some doubts, they may raise their hands, and I would request Mr. Ajit to please unmute the participants one by one. Whoever raises hand to ask some questions. So at this outset, again, I thank you all for being with us in this meeting. So Mr. Ajit, anybody, any doubt, any question? So the floor is open for all the participants.
Okay. I'm sure I was expecting a question from Bhanu Pratap Singh is here, and he has his specialization on the new education policy. I have heard him on this topic, so I request him to put his observation and the question forward. Sir, please.
Thank you, Ajit sir. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Aditya Bhaiya for a wonderful talk. I have a very small doubt that in the new education policy, I'm not expert of first of all, education policy, but being teacher, I also read some stuff. So my first doubt is that whatever new things we are seeing in Banaras Hindu University, like daily some circular is coming after 2 to 3 days for MOOC and other type of things to go on online mode. Even our senior professors are not responding even what we call that mails. At that I'm telling my experience, and when I have said once that why you people are not responding those mails, they are saying we are busy in other things, and we don't have time. So my question is that somehow Central University will try to like adapt all these things, but what will be the future of State University in this new education policy, in which I know the idea of like this online teaching is guided by market, but like what I can see from this in short term, government is doing like as a cost cutting measure, like they are trying to reduce their cost by reducing faculty size and all. So I'm saying my a small doubt is that what will be the future of a state university which provides like education to larger masses, especially marginalized section, like in this new education policy. Thank you.
Yeah, Ajit ji or Vivek ji, would you like me to respond right away or later on? Should I respond now, or it's a question session, or we will take it on the discussion mode? Vivek ji. Yes.
Sir,
should I respond?
Yeah, please do, sir, because sometimes it happens the questions get kind of lost and so please, sir, respond.
Yeah, as you say. See, thank you, Vanu. It's a very pertinent question and a very pointed one, and very much connected to the last thought which I shared. See, online education or education technology, as you agreed with me, it's a market-based concept. It's not politics, because stakeholders are not on board. Stakeholders are off board. So it's not politics. But I'm sorry to say, this is not economics also. Even the market mechanism is not operational. Like if I have to sell Colgate, I will make you aware the best.
I think Aditya sir, I think you have some internet issue. Fluctuations are also there in your internet. So sometimes we are not getting you clearly.
So, okay.
Please repeat the last sentence that you were continuing, sir.
Okay. The last thing which I was saying, that this is neither politics nor economics, as you are saying that even the senior professors are reluctant, and what will happen to state universities. To be very blunt, from the market point of view, this process is really going to disturb the state universities in a huge way, where there are no resources and there is no possibility of providing resources. Even the resources are being provided, the arrangement is very temporary. Even the computer lab would be there, so the appointment of lab attendant would not be permanent. 1 year deputation, 2 years like this, so lab would not be functional. So ultimately the thing is, the market mechanism is trying to take control of everything, take control of school education, take control of higher education also, because education and health, if you can refer to the KPMG report, the minimum return from investment in education technology is 66 to 68%. Means this year you invest 100 rupees, next year your money would be 168. And this is the minimum. Maximum could be 1400. So it's a highly profitable investment. So in this process, whether state universities will survive or not, or will become more worse, there is a highly chance of being that. But since if the awareness is also not being created from the government part also, market is sideline, market is pushing us in the corners, but government is not ready to support us. That's the thing.
Okay, thank you, Aditi sir. So few more questions, please. If you have any question, you can raise your hand.
Okay, I have a little query. After that, Sanjeev Kumar from TISS would be coming with his question. I was wondering, Aditya sir, of course, in today's new liberal society, everything gets governed by the market interest. That's a very clear fact. But when we come away from these institutional setups, like of course you were talking about this digital divide, and the basis was how the educational institutions functions into their structure. But when we come out of it, when we come in the arena of civil society, or say society in general, do you not see, because what I felt as if you are completely negating the kind of uh, equalizing social access of this online education, this new trend. I also see there is opportunity here. It's like, as you can see here on this platform, it's like I never imagined a year ago that myself sitting in Bhagalpur, you in some different city would be handling such a seminar. So goes for some other people in the society also. So how do you see the equalizing access, the social access to this online platform? So if you can say something on this part also, because I felt you totally denying this aspect, sir.
Yeah, I'm really very happy to get this question, Ajit. It's a very deep rooted, deep meaning question. Very good, Ajit. It's a it's a trick. It's a trick which neoliberal regime plays with us. As I said, when it gives you iPhone 5, it says it's the invention of century. When it gives you iPhone 7, it says it's way better than iPhone 5 and there cannot be a better phone than this. Okay. So though this technology has given us opportunity, yeah, really this kind of benefit, this kind of platform is not there. This gives us a level playing field, we believe so, but actually it takes lot out of us, and it's up to us how we are taking it. It's up to us. It's not just one Zoom call or one Zoom platform. It's again, if you see, it's going to be a layer of divisions. I'm saying don't expect this technology to bridge the gaps. If you are aware, then it will not create more gaps. Are you getting? It should not create more gaps if you are aware. Rest, the remaining gap it is not going to fill. Like you are saying, okay, it gives us access to have a seminar. Yeah, it gives us access to have a seminar, but it takes, in lieu of it, what it takes. It governs the way it's being conducted. Okay, again, it governs the way, like mobile phones, like all the industrial inventions. it really gave us access like ATMs. Okay, but those ATMs, when it came first time, it really a freedom. Anywhere in any city, you can take out the money. Now, with our expenditure pattern, companies are planning their own ways. Okay, so I'm not saying it's all lose. We are gaining, yes, from the mobile phones we are gaining. It's better phones, giving better access, better comfort. But are we able to bridge those divides in real sense? When the seminars, actual seminars, emails came, video conferencing came, everything is there. US is US, India is India, New York University remained New York. It became more and more prominent. Rather, it's coming the, like Bhanu will confirm this. They say trade becomes everybody better off. Is it Bhanu? But some countries are getting better in the trade and taking control of the trade. Yes, yes, but there are exceptions like Singapore. There are exceptions which have learned those tricks and really done well. So now it's up to us, up to the participants, how we are taking advantage of this technological bridging or creating more gaps. I would like to request Ajit ji or Vivek ji. Sometimes if you have any discussion on privatization, please include me, because it's of my personal interest. We will discuss privatization in great detail some other day. Here, I would like to clarify is, in education remained privatized. Like if you see the colonial times, even Banaras Hindu University was a private effort, non-governmental effort. It's a community effort. Education remained like this, but education was deliberately made a national asset, national subject, and now it's being deliberately pushed to the market asset, not the private. There is a distinction between private and market, which I carry every time. Private is something which is like your mother. It's very private. It's who can take care, none other than only one person. That's private. But this kind of setup is a very much market-based. Market-based problem is whosoever earns more from this setup will be guiding this. From this Zoom call and Zoom seminar, Zoom meetings, ultimate gain goes to the market. We take iPhone X, iPhone 11, ultimate gain of the technology goes to the corporate companies, the larger gains. That's the thing I am emphasizing. If we are aware, we can take larger gains. And if we are made aware by the government, by the policy frameworks, the larger gains can come to us.
Sushant, can you please hear me? You can raise your question.
Hello.
And after Sushant, Debojit, you please, after Sushant, you can raise your question.
Sushant, please, you come ahead with your question and please be quick.
Hello.
Yeah, Sushant,
Yes,
please.
Sir. Aditya, sir, as you have said in the last part of your lecture, that neither the students nor the parents or teachers of state universities are concerned about online education. Then what, according to you, online education policy should have to improve their mindset, as online education is inevitable in the near future? So this is my question.
Yes, yes.
Aditya, Sushant is a very, is a BA third year student and kind of ours.
Hello.
Sir, please respond, Aditya sir.
Ajit, I would like you to repeat the question because I was not able to listen completely.
Hello.
Sushant, can you please repeat the question
Yes,
again?
sir. Yes, I'm repeating. Sir, as you have said in the last part of your lecture, that neither the students nor the parents or teachers of state universities are concerned about online education. So I wanted to ask you that what, according to you, online education policy should have to improve their mindset, the mindset of such students, such teachers or parents, to improve their mindset. What online education policy should have? Because as we are knowing that online education is inevitable in the near future.
Yeah, very good query, and I think it's a very pertinent, and it has to be, as you have said, directs use of existing education system becomes a system. You have already resolved the issues of existing education system, and then you are coming. So the moment they come with the necessities or requirements or the benefits or need of online classes, then it is believed that they have already resolved the issue of existing problems of existing system. Are you getting my point? Which government is unable to do. That's why government has escaped all those points. Government does not want to even go into that zone of discussing those things. So government has left it to the parents, left it to the students, left it to the teachers to accept this or be compelled by this.
Okay, so Debojit sir, you have some query. You can please ask the question.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, please.
Sir, it was an interesting talk, and my it's rather not a query, but my my feeling of a real personal ethical dilemma. Because the new alternative which have come up because of the COVID, for example, the online classes, starting from the teaching, we have been guided by the university formally that you can share the materials to the students, including the YouTubes and so on and so forth. Because to share something to the student requires a lot of study and scrutiny, which has not been allowed to be done. Next, the learning that the students should be doing, we exactly do not know whether the students are learning or not. So that kind of a to and fro is totally siphoned off. The third one is the evaluation, which is one of the very crucial part of teaching process. So when the students are writing something, we cannot evaluate, starting from the teaching, then the learning. And today, right now, I'm enjoying and attending this particular talk and enriched by a lot of ideas. But at the same time, believe me, I'm also conducting an online university practical examinations. So no scrutiny, nothing. If the two students are submitting the same paper with the same handwriting, scanned, and at the same time, I really do not know whether they are, what kind of evaluation should I be doing it. So it really opens a Pandora's box. So what I think, the alternative mode of learning and the teaching that is online reminds me the fact that the chance favors the practice mind. We have not been practiced. And this practice has to be done with the help of the good education policy. So there is a very great wrong in the policy making. That's my personal ethical dilemma. One very interesting thing is, before this particular COVID-induced pandemic-induced online classes, what I have seen in the university learning is, I take environmental ecology in the college. Earlier in my university, they used to give certain kind of funding, 15,000, 20,000 by the university, so that you can take the student to desert, you can take the student to mountains, and you learn something. Because the subject that I am dealing with the student requires a lot of practical exposure to students outside. Then after my joining to the institution, the university came out with this saying that we are not giving this money. Rather, you can show the ecosystems, different parts of different diversity with the help of pictures and photographs to the students. That's how I felt. And now comes the online. So it's a total dilemma. So I don't think this is a very seriously good alternative, but a very seriously invasive mode that we are facing. So that's a personal ethical dilemma that I want to share. But otherwise also I have learned so many things new from you, and thank you so much.
Okay, so may I request Mr. Pramod? He has some question. And I think this will be our last, or anybody else? Anybody want to ask something? Otherwise, this Pramod question, this will be our last question of the session.
Thank you for giving time. Sir, I wanted to ask, as the drive for new education policy is between us, and we are already exploring and innovating with the policy document. And in between, COVID-19 came, and now the university system, teaching, learning, everything has been disrupted. So do you not think this is, as we say, double dip recession in economics? So this is it not the double dip recession for education policy or online education now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir,
I got
Aditya
your
sir,
point.
please conclude it,
Yeah.
because we are already running late.
I'm concluding, and I'm thanking Devajit sir for asking this question. I'm really grateful to you for asking this, and Pramod, also your question is also
Again, sir, Aditya sir,
much connected.
No, your voice is not coming. I think you have
to Devajit sir's question.
Okay.
Okay, I'm concluding. Sir, first statement for this webinar or meeting could be: online education is very, very costly. Please, if you are making the minutes of this meeting or any summary of this entire discussion, please write this: online education is very, very costly. Okay, and we are being disguised it's very cheap. We are being disguised that it's very cheap. So when you are saying that online assessment, even for the submission assignments, all the foreign universities who are using online education or bridge education, they are having plagiarism softwares. They are having softwares for checking video contents, plagiarism in the video itself. So there are lot of internet tools, software tools available, who can just check that from where these web contents or the video contents have been taken. Even the picture analysis tools are there. If universities are having, even for the projects, what our kids are doing in the schools, taking picture from internet, printing it and submitting. This is wrong, utterly wrong. You have to take out a camera, click a picture, and then upload it. And taking picture is not that easy. It requires editing. It requires expertise. So first thing, sir, you have said the dichotomy is online education is very, very costly, even way costlier than traditional education. The government who is not able to invest in traditional education, how do we think government will invest in online education? That's point number one. Point number two, the online education has greater risk of creating theft. As some of the philosophers said, we were naive, we were innocent, but education made us thief. Education made us cheaters. So on education or even bulldoze our integrity. So there are risks are enormous. If in your university Turnitin is not there, in your university plagiarism checker is not there, it's a disaster. And one plagiarism software would cost you around 50 lakhs, even 1 year subscription. So all the submissions are bogus if you are not checking plagiarism. I'm coming to Pramod's question. Yes, in the double depreciation, already economy is in shambles. If we are resting on online education, means we are using our savings and putting it in the companies who are doing business of online education. As it happened for demonetization for Paytms or other online payment apps, similar things is happening at the time of lockdown to the Zooms and others. They are taking our data, they are taking all the email informations, and later on they will sell us products based on this. Yeah, and we are habituated to pay. In fact, you must be cutting the cost on vegetables, but recharging your phone, recharging your internet or 4G speed, we are doing it. We are investing in online education. You believe it, you accept it or not, cutting necessary expenditure and investing in online.
Yes. Thank you, Aditi sir. So to make this, we are moving towards the end of the session. So at the last, I would request Mr. Sanjeev Kumar sir, can you please